They said it was just community gardening. But when I saw her walking through my tomato rows, heels deep in the soil, basket full of MY harvest, I knew this wasn't gardening. It was theft. And when she smiled and said, the HOA approved it, I realized something darker was going on behind those manicured lawns. Something that would cost her everything. Hey everyone, welcome back to HOA Stories. I'm Jake, a small-town guy who moved to the suburbs to live a quieter life, grow some crops, and mind my own business. But if you've ever dealt with an HOA, you already know, peace is the one thing they'll never let you keep. If you hate HOAs as much as I do, hit that subscribe button. And drop a big BOOHOA in the comments if you've ever had to fight back. Share this with someone who's dealt with these power-hungry neighborhood cops. Because today, you're about to hear how my farm became the battlefield. It started like any other morning. Sun hitting the top of the tomato vines. The smell of earth and leaves filling the air. I had coffee in one hand and a garden hose in the other. Watering the rows I'd spent months nurturing. This land wasn't big, but it was mine. A few acres on the edge of a suburban development, where the HOA lines barely touched my property. Or so I thought. I remember hearing footsteps behind me. Sharp, confident, like someone who didn't belong there. When I turned around, there she was. Perfect hair, sunglasses bigger than her patience. White blouse, pencil skirt, holding a wicker basket. And that smug smile people wear when they think rules don't apply to them. She picked up one of my tomatoes. Rolled it in her hand like she was choosing jewelry. Then said, "These are the community's tomatoes, right?" I froze for a second. Thought she was joking. I said, "No ma'am, these are mine. I planted them, watered them, paid for the soil." But she laughed. "Oh come on," she said. "I'm part of the HOA gardening committee. This is for everyone. Didn't you read the notice?" Notice? There was no notice. Just like there was no community when it came to my hard work. I walked closer, trying to stay calm. "Lady, this isn't HOA property. This is MY farm. I pay taxes for this land." She raised an eyebrow and took a bite of the tomato. Right in front of me. Like it was some kind of challenge. Juice dripped down her fingers. She smiled and said, "Then maybe you should share. It looks like you've got plenty." Something snapped in me right then. The entitlement, the arrogance, the way she said share. Like I owed her something for living near me. I grabbed my phone. Snapped a picture. And said, "You just trespassed on private property." Her face changed, quick. The smile dropped, and she stepped back. "You can't do that," she said. "The HOA will handle this." "Oh, I bet they will," I said. "But not the way you think." That evening, I called the HOA office. Asked to speak to whoever gave permission for people to raid my farm. They told me something even crazier. Apparently, someone, guess who, filed a community project request to classify MY farmland as part of the neighborhood shared garden initiative. Without my signature. Without my consent. Without a single vote. I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was unbelievable how deep these HOA people went into other people's lives. Next morning, there was a letter taped to my gate. It said I was in violation of HOA communal property rules and had to restore community access to my crops. I swear. I felt my blood boil. I drove straight to the HOA office. And there she was, the same woman from my field. Sitting at the front desk. Typing away like she owned the place. I said, "You've got 5 seconds to explain what this is before I call the sheriff." She didn't even look up. Just smiled and said, "Oh Jake, we're neighbors. Don't make this ugly." Ugly? Lady, it already was. That's when I decided enough was enough. They wanted to play community? Fine. We do it legally. That night I called my attorney. Explained everything. He laughed, said, "Jake, you've got a solid trespassing and property rights case here." And just like that, I filed a claim. Against the HOA. And against her, personally. Next day, she came back to the farm. Trying to smooth things out. I could see the fake politeness melting off her face as soon as she realized I wasn't backing down. She said, "You're really going to take this to court over a few tomatoes?" I smiled. And said, "No. I'm taking it to court over your arrogance." Her jaw dropped. And that, right there, was the moment I knew. She wasn't just scared of losing the case. She was scared of losing control. Because when people like her lose control, they panic. And panic leads to mistakes. And those mistakes were about to make me 10 times richer than before. What would you have done if your HOA tried to steal your farm like this? Would you have taken them to court or handled it another way? Tell me in the comments. I'm curious how far you'd go to stop an HOA Karen. She must have called every board member that night. Because by sunrise, they were on my property again. 3 of them. Clipboards in hand. Matching polo shirts. That smug HOA energy radiating off them like cheap perfume. They stood near my gate. Didn't even knock. Just started taking pictures of my crops. Whispering to each other like they were inspecting a crime scene. I walked up and said, "Morning, can I help you folks with something?" The tall one, the HOA president, gave me a tight smile. "Mr. Jake, we received reports that your farm is in violation of HOA landscaping standards." I laughed so hard I almost dropped my coffee. Landscaping standards? This is a farm. You can't regulate crops. He raised a hand like he was lecturing a student. Actually, Section 4B of our community guidelines includes visible plant arrangements affecting neighborhood aesthetics. Aesthetics. That's how far they were willing to stretch it. I said, "You mean my tomatoes are too ugly for your neighborhood?" He didn't answer. Just kept scribbling something on his clipboard. The woman from yesterday, the Karen, stood beside him. Arms crossed. Smiling like she'd already won. I could tell this wasn't about tomatoes anymore. This was personal. They left without another word. But I knew what was coming next. 2 days later, I got 3 letters in the mail. Each one thicker than a Bible. Each one full of fines, warnings, and HOA legal jargon. Failure to comply with communal access guidelines. Unapproved agricultural operation. Unauthorized use of residential land. They hit me with $1,500 in fines per day. That's when I realized they weren't just being petty. They were trying to force me out. They thought I'd fold. That I'd pay up or back down like everyone else they'd bullied before. But I wasn't like everyone else. I called my lawyer again. Told him everything. He chuckled and said, "Well, Jake, they just made your case stronger. Document everything. We're going to make them regret every letter." So I did. Every visit. Every photo. Every ridiculous fine, all saved, time-stamped, and ready for court. Meanwhile, Karen kept showing up near my property. Pretending to check soil quality. Walking right past my no trespassing sign like it was invisible. One afternoon, I caught her on camera again. This time, she wasn't alone. She had a few kids with her, probably from the neighborhood. And she was telling them, "See? This is why we share resources in our community. Jake is just being selfish." Selfish. That word hit me harder than I expected. Because all I ever did was mind my own business. I wasn't the one trying to steal someone else's food. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the court paperwork. Half angry, half amused. Thinking how crazy it was that a bunch of neighbors with nothing better to do could turn a tomato patch into a legal war zone. The next morning, I decided to play their game, but smarter. I printed out every HOA bylaw I could find. Read each one like a detective solving a crime. And there it was. A loophole. Section 9A, agricultural exemption for non-residential plots. Basically, if a property wasn't part of the HOA's original development map, it couldn't be regulated under their aesthetic or communal standards. Guess whose land wasn't on their original map? Mine. So I wrote a formal notice back to the HOA, attached the exemption clause, and politely informed them that their fines were legally invalid. A week later, I got another visit. This time, from their lawyer. He was slick. Nice suit, fancy pen, polite tone. But I could tell he was sent to intimidate me. He said, "Mr. Jake, it would be best for everyone if you dropped this case. The HOA doesn't want unnecessary conflict." I said, "Funny, neither do I. But your board already brought it to my doorstep." He sighed. "You have to understand, Mrs. Carson." "Wait," I interrupted. "Who?" "Mrs. Carson," he repeated. "Head of the gardening committee. She's the one who filed the shared access proposal. So she had a name now. And a title." I smiled. "Perfect. Tell Mrs. Carson I'll see her in court." He left without another word. But the next morning, I found something new on my fence. A sign that read, "Community Garden Access, sponsored by HOA." I swear my jaw dropped. They were doubling down. Even after I'd given them legal notice. That was it for me. No more warnings. No more letters. I called the sheriff's office, filed an official trespassing complaint, and sent a copy straight to the HOA board. Within 48 hours, things exploded. Half the neighborhood started whispering. Some sided with me. Others sided with her. It was like a suburban civil war. Tomato edition. A few folks came by quietly at night. Told me they'd been bullied by the HOA too. One guy even said they fined him for having the wrong shade of green on his mailbox. I realized I wasn't alone. These people were afraid of the HOA. Afraid of being next. And that's when it hit me, this wasn't just about my farm anymore. It was about standing up to people who thought power gave them ownership. So when the court date came, I showed up ready. Files stacked. Photos printed. Every trespass, every fine, every arrogant word documented. She was there too. Mrs. Carson. Same perfect hair, same fake smile. But this time, no sunglasses. Because you don't need them when the light's already exposing you. When the judge asked me to explain my case, I said, "Your Honor, I'm not here because someone stole my tomatoes. I'm here because someone tried to steal my rights." You could feel the silence in the room. Even the HOA lawyer shifted uncomfortably. The judge leaned forward. "Continue," he said. So I did. I told everything, start to finish. Every lie. Every fake rule. Every intimidation tactic. When it was her turn to speak, she tried to twist it. Said I misunderstood the HOA's intentions. That it was a community misunderstanding. But the photos didn't lie. Neither did the time-stamped videos of her trespassing, tomato in hand. The judge sighed. Then said words I'll never forget. "Mrs. Carson, your committee had no jurisdiction over this property. The HOA's actions were unlawful. Mr. Jake is awarded full compensation and damages for harassment." She froze. The lawyer dropped his pen. And I smiled for the first time in weeks. Justice tasted sweeter than any tomato I'd ever grown. But as I walked out of that courtroom, I saw her glare at me from across the hallway. And in that moment, I knew. This wasn't over. Because when HOA people lose power, they don't quit. They plot. If your HOA lost in court like this, do you think they'd back off or come back with revenge? Be honest, what would you do next if you were me? I thought winning in court would be the end of it. I really did. But when you humiliate a Karen, especially one with HOA power, you don't just win a case. You light a fire. A few days after the hearing, things got weird. First, I noticed my mailbox. It was smashed. Clean dent right in the center. Then, one morning, a letter showed up, no envelope, no signature. Just one sentence printed in bold. Farmers don't belong in this neighborhood. I laughed it off at first. Told myself maybe it was just some random prank. But inside, I knew exactly who was behind it. Mrs. Carson. The same woman who once bit into my tomato like she owned the planet. She wasn't done. She just changed tactics. See, HOA people have a special kind of evil. They don't attack you directly. They use the system. They find loopholes. And then they bleed you with rules. A week later, I got a new notice. It wasn't from the HOA this time. It was from the county zoning department. Apparently, someone filed an anonymous complaint, claiming my agricultural activity was causing soil runoff and pest infestation. Anonymous, huh? Yeah, right. So now I had inspectors walking through my property, taking soil samples, snapping photos like paparazzi. One of them even whispered, "Off the record, sir, whoever filed this must really have it out for you." No kidding. That night, I sat on my porch, watched the lights from her house across the street, and thought about how deep these HOA wars could go. It wasn't just about control. It was about ego. And she had plenty of it. Next morning, I saw her outside, watering her front yard with that fake smile again. Like nothing happened. I waved. She ignored me. Classic HOA queen behavior. Then she yelled loud enough for me to hear, "Hope the county enjoys your little farm, Jake." That's when it hit me, she wanted me to react. She wanted a fight she could use against me later. So I didn't give her one. I just smiled back, said nothing, and went inside. But 2 days later, the sheriff showed up again. This time, with a notice for noise complaints. Apparently, someone claimed my irrigation pumps were disturbing the peace. He rolled his eyes while handing me the paper. Said, "Don't worry, Jake. We get calls like this all the time. Usually HOA drama." Still, I had to shut my pumps off after 8 p.m. now. All because she couldn't handle losing in court. I swear, that woman could have written a textbook called How to Harass a Neighbor Legally. And the craziest part? The HOA board backed her up quietly. No direct involvement. No letters this time. Just invisible pressure. Like a ghost in the system. But she made one mistake. She underestimated how stubborn I could be. So I started documenting again. Every anonymous complaint. Every petty trick. Every single thing she did. Then one afternoon, karma arrived early. I was fixing my fence when I heard screaming from across the road. Mrs. Carson was in her backyard, yelling at 2 landscapers. Apparently, they trimmed the wrong section of her hedge, HOA property hedge. The irony was delicious. She kept shouting, "I'll fine you. I'll call the HOA. I'll report you." And the landscaper, bless his heart, said, "Lady, we don't work for the HOA. We work for the city." I had to bite my lip not to laugh out loud. But that incident gave me an idea. If she loved filing complaints so much, I could file one too. Legally. So I gathered every video, every audio clip, and photo I had, and took it to the local sheriff's office. Filed for harassment through misuse of authority. It's a real thing. Turns out, using an HOA position to personally target someone can get you removed from the board. A few weeks later, she got the notice. And oh man, the look on her face when she found out she was under investigation. Priceless. She marched straight to my gate that evening. Red-faced, shaking. "You think this is funny?" she yelled. "You think you can embarrass me again?" I said, "You did that all by yourself." She pointed her finger at me, just like that first day in the field. "You'll regret this, Jake. You don't know who you're messing with." I stepped closer. Lowered my voice. "Yeah, I do. A woman who can't stand losing." She stormed off. But not before snapping a few photos of my property, again. Probably for her collection. I thought that was the end of it. But 2 nights later, I woke up to headlights shining across my field. Someone had driven right up to the edge of my crops. When I stepped outside, the vehicle sped off. No license plate I could read. Just dust and silence. The next morning, I found my irrigation line cut clean in half. That was it. No more games. I installed cameras. Motion lights. Everything I could to protect my land. And within days, I caught her on footage again. Sneaking around near my fence. Holding a flashlight and a clipboard. I didn't even call the cops this time. I sent the footage directly to the HOA board and county officials. Attached a short note that said, "If this continues, I'll file for a restraining order." Silence for 2 weeks. Then one afternoon, I came home to find something new. A for sale sign in her yard. At first, I didn't believe it. I thought maybe it was another bluff. But nope, she was moving. Word around the block was the HOA board forced her to step down. Too many complaints. Too much drama. Too many legal headaches. Apparently, her little power trip had finally blown up in her face. And when the moving trucks rolled in, I stood at my gate. Watched her carry boxes to her car. For a second, I almost felt bad. Almost. She glanced at me. Didn't say a word. Just slammed her car door and drove off. And just like that, peace returned. No more fake fines. No more trespassing. No more midnight lights on my fence. Just quiet. And the soft rustle of tomato leaves in the breeze. But even after all that, I still couldn't shake one thought. If one HOA Karen could go this far out of spite, how many others were out there doing the same to their neighbors? That's when I decided to share my story. Not for revenge, but as a warning. Because people need to know. When HOAs cross the line, they don't just ruin lawns. They ruin lives. Have you ever met someone who just couldn't handle losing? Would you forgive them after all this, or make sure they never forget what they did? Tell me in the comments. I really want to know what you do. For the first time in months, the air around my farm felt quiet. No angry letters. No sneaky photos. No late-night cars sitting outside my fence. Mrs. Carson was gone. The for sale sign had vanished, her house empty, curtains drawn tight like a chapter finally closed. But peace, in an HOA neighborhood? It never lasts long. Because when one power-hungry person leaves, there's always another waiting to take their place. And this one was different. The first HOA meeting after her exit was held at the community clubhouse. I hadn't planned on going. I'd had enough of those stuffy rooms and fake smiles. But curiosity got me. So I went. Sat quietly in the back corner while everyone pretended nothing ever happened. That's when they introduced the new HOA president. Please welcome our new board leader, Mr. Grant Miller. He looked nothing like Carson. No pearl necklaces, no floral dresses. Just a calm, polite man in his 40s, clean-cut, confident, businesslike. He smiled when he spoke. Talked about unity, respect, and fresh beginnings. It all sounded good. Too good. He even looked at me directly and said, "We've had a few misunderstandings in the past, but I believe we can build better relations with all residents, including Mr. Jake here." Everyone clapped. Some even turned and smiled at me. And for a second, I thought maybe this guy was different. But man, I was wrong. 2 weeks later, I got a letter from the HOA, new logo, new tone, same poison. It said, "Due to zoning clarifications, all non-decorative vegetation must be approved by the board." Non-decorative vegetation. That meant my crops. They just found a new way to come after me, wrapped in friendly words and policy jargon. I went to see Grant personally. He lived just 3 houses down, in one of those perfect cookie-cutter homes with trimmed hedges and spotless driveways. He welcomed me in with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Jake, good to see you," he said. "Look, I'm not against your farm. I actually admire your hard work. But we have to keep the neighborhood's aesthetic consistent." I laughed, trying to keep my cool. "You're telling me tomatoes don't fit the aesthetic?" He shrugged. "It's not about that. It's about compliance. You understand? Compliance. That word again. The HOA's favorite word." I leaned forward and said, "Let me guess, this rule came up right after Carson moved, huh?" He smiled. "Let's just say some of her ideas were ahead of their time." So there it was. The truth. He wasn't new blood. He was her replacement piece. Same mindset, just better disguise. I started noticing things again. Different things this time. Little flags placed on the edge of my property, survey markers. An HOA inspector walking around with a tablet, pretending to record boundary details. When I asked what was going on, they said the board was reassessing property borders for uniform landscaping. Uniform landscaping. That's HOA code for, we're planning something. So I checked the county site myself. And sure enough, a new proposal had been filed by the HOA. It was for community beautification expansion. Fancy name for a project that included a small green buffer zone right where my crops stood. They were trying to reclaim part of my land under the pretext of neighborhood beautification. I didn't lose my cool this time. I'd learned how they operated. Instead, I went to my neighbor, Old Man Reeves. He'd lived there longer than anyone. Knew every line, every fence, every property shift that had ever happened. When I showed him the HOA's map, he squinted and said, "That's a lie. That buffer zone was scrapped 20 years ago. HOA tried it back then, too. So we dug through old records. Town archives, land deeds, everything. And there it was, the original property map. Clear as day. My land extended 15 feet past the point they were claiming. When I confronted Grant with the document, he looked surprised for half a second. Then his smile returned. "Well, perhaps we were working off outdated information. We'll review it." He said it calmly. But I could see it in his eyes, he hated being caught. That night, I found my trash bins knocked over and a dead raccoon thrown near my fence. Coincidence? Maybe. But I'd learned not to believe in coincidences anymore. Weeks passed. I stayed quiet. Didn't attend any more HOA meetings. Until one afternoon, I got an email. Subject line, Urgent Farm Safety Concerns. It was from the HOA Safety Committee. They wanted me to cease all agricultural watering pending a drainage compliance review. That was the final straw. I drove straight to the county environmental office. Filed a report, attached all my previous harassment evidence, and requested a county-level oversight hearing. If they wanted a fight, they were going to get it on paper, legally, again. A month later, the hearing was held. Grant came with his neat little binder, HOA logo printed clean on every page. I came with a file twice as thick. Photos, documents, maps, letters, timestamps. The county officer looked at both of us and said, Mr. Miller, these repeated notices, zoning claims, and property revisions appear targeted. Do you have a legitimate basis for them? Grant tried to talk circles around it. Said words like standardization, policy refresh, and visual harmony. But I didn't need to say much. My evidence spoke louder. At the end, the officer said plainly, Mr. Miller, we're suspending the HOA's zoning privileges pending review. Mr. Jake, your farm operations are fully compliant. I could see his jaw tighten. That perfect calm mask finally cracking. He gathered his papers and left without a word. Days later, the whispers started. Apparently, the HOA board was furious at Grant. They said he'd overreached, caused liability exposure. And within a week, he resigned. Another president gone. Another victory that didn't even feel like one anymore. Because every win came with new enemies. And I knew this story wasn't finished yet. One evening, as the sun went down and the sky turned orange over my fields, I noticed something strange. A white SUV parked across the street. Engine off. Lights out. It sat there for almost 20 minutes. Then slowly drove away. The next morning, I found a new envelope on my gate. No HOA seal this time. Just 5 words written in black ink. You think you've won? No signature. No return address. Nothing. And for the first time since this all began, I felt it, the chill again. Because it wasn't just about crops anymore. It wasn't about rules or fines or land. It was about pride. And someone out there still wanted revenge. If someone came back for revenge after you'd already beaten them fair and square, would you stand your ground again, or finally walk away? Tell me in the comments, because Jake's fight might not be over yet. That letter sat on my kitchen table for hours. I just stared at it, 5 words that kept looping in my head. You think you've won? I tried to shrug it off. Maybe it was a prank. Maybe one of the HOA members was still bitter. But deep down, I knew better. HOA wars never end cleanly. They end when somebody finally breaks. It was around midnight when I first smelled the smoke. At first, I thought my wood stove had gone bad again. But when I stepped outside, I saw it, a faint orange glow at the far end of the field. I ran. Barefoot. No flashlight. Just adrenaline. When I got there, the wooden fence that marked my southern boundary was on fire. The flames weren't huge yet, just creeping up the planks, but it was spreading fast. The dry autumn wind made sure of that. I grabbed the garden hose, turned it on full blast, and started spraying. The smoke stung my eyes, my throat burned, but I didn't stop. It took nearly 20 minutes before I got it under control. By then, the fence was half gone, charred black, the smell of burnt wood thick in the air. And that's when I saw it, lying just outside the fence line, near the ditch. A red plastic gas can. Empty. I called the sheriff's office immediately. 2 deputies arrived within half an hour, lights flashing silently across the field. They took photos, bagged the gas can, asked questions. Any idea who might want to do this? One of them asked. I hesitated. There were names. Faces. A whole board of suspects. But saying the HOA out loud just sounded crazy. Still, I told them everything, the letters, the meetings, the zoning tricks, the threats, the court case, the note on my gate. They listened carefully, took notes, and said they'd file an arson report. Then the younger deputy said, "Thing is, sir, whoever did this knew your camera angles. There's not a single clear shot of the back fence." He was right. My cameras covered the gate and front fields, not the back perimeter. Whoever it was had done their homework. The next morning, word spread like wildfire, pun intended. Neighbors came by, acting concerned. A few even brought coffee, pretending they cared. But I saw the curiosity in their eyes, like they were watching a movie play out live. One of them, Mr. Howard, whispered, "You know, I saw a car last night, white SUV, parked near the back road. White SUV. Just like the one I'd seen earlier that week. That was all I needed. I drove to the HOA office later that day. Grant's nameplate was gone, but the rest of the board was there, including Linda Hayes, the new acting president. She looked up as I walked in, her expression tight. "Mr. Jake, we're very sorry about the incident. We heard there was a fire." I said nothing. Just watched her fidget with her pen. Then I asked, "You know anyone in the neighborhood drives a white SUV?" Her eyes flickered for half a second. Then she said, "We don't track our members' personal vehicles." That told me everything. 2 days later, the sheriff called back. No fingerprints on the gas can. No tracks in the soil. No license plate from nearby cameras. Whoever it was had been careful. But the deputy added one more thing. "We checked the fuel residue in the can. Premium unleaded, same type sold at one gas station nearby. Only 5 customers paid cash that night. We're checking footage." It wasn't much, but it was something. A week passed. No new letters. No cars. Just quiet. Too quiet. Then one evening, I noticed a shadow near the barn, faint movement, just outside the floodlight's reach. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped outside slowly. "Hey!" I shouted. No answer. Then, a rustle. Fast footsteps. I sprinted toward the sound, flashlight beam bouncing wildly until it caught something. A figure, hooded, sprinting across the field toward the woods. I yelled again, "Stop!" But they didn't. They disappeared into the trees, gone like smoke. I searched the ground where they'd been. Found a footprint in the mud, heavy boot tread, and something shiny half-buried nearby. A key fob. Next morning, I took it straight to the sheriff. Within hours, they traced it to a 2018 Ford Explorer. White. Registered to none other than Grant Miller. That was it. The smoking gun. They got a warrant, searched his garage, and found a half-empty gas container matching the same residue from my property. Grant was arrested 2 days later. Arson. Trespassing. Retaliation after legal judgment. And the news spread faster than any HOA memo ever had. Neighbors whispered. Board members resigned quietly, one by one. By the time it reached local TV, the headline read, HOA president arrested in arson case against farmer neighbor. When I saw that headline, I didn't feel happy. I didn't feel vindicated. I just felt tired. Because this wasn't victory anymore, it was survival. That night, I stood by my field again, the new fence half-built, the air still smelling faintly of burnt pine, and I realized something. They could try to find me, sue me, even burn me out. But I wasn't leaving. This land wasn't just dirt and crops. It was proof that sometimes, the little guy wins, not because he's stronger, but because he refuses to quit. Weeks later, I got a knock on my door. It was the same sheriff deputy. He said Grant had taken a plea deal, 2 years probation, community service, and a restraining order keeping him 100 yards from my property. Then he added something that made my stomach turn. Mr. Miller claimed he wasn't acting alone. That night, I sat in the dark, thinking about all of it, the letters, the cars, the flames. If Grant wasn't alone, who else was still out there? Then my phone buzzed. A new message. No number. No name. Just one line. The HOA always rebuilds. And I swear, as I looked out the window toward the streetlight, that same white SUV rolled by, slow. Then disappeared into the night. If your neighbor burned your property and still had people backing him up, would you fight again or finally move away? Tell me below, because Jake's next battle might be his last. That message hit harder than the fire ever did. The HOA always rebuilds. I stared at my phone for a long time. No number. No ID. Just those 5 words glowing in the dark. And for the first time, I realized this wasn't over. The next few weeks felt wrong. Quiet in all the wrong ways. Neighbors who used to nod stopped making eye contact. Cars slowed when they passed my driveway, like they were checking if I'd packed up yet. And every HOA sign that used to say community meeting next Tuesday now read, under new leadership. That phrase alone made my stomach turn. Because new leadership always meant one thing, the same poison in a new bottle. One morning, while fixing the barn door, I saw a drone buzzing overhead. It wasn't mine. I followed it with my eyes, silver body, green lights, hovering right above my pasture. It stayed for a minute, then zipped away toward the cul-de-sac. Later that night, I checked my mail. No letters. But there was an envelope taped to my mailbox. Inside? A printed picture. Aerial shot of me. Standing by my barn, looking up at the drone. Below it, a single line typed in red ink. We're still watching. That was it. They wanted me scared. They wanted me paranoid. So I decided to give them something better, proof. I installed new cameras, hidden ones this time. One inside the barn loft, one near the east fence, and another high in the oak tree overlooking the road. I even borrowed a thermal cam from a friend who worked in wildlife research. If they wanted to play spy games, I could play too. 3 nights later, it paid off. At 2:37 a.m., the motion alert pinged my phone. I pulled up the feed, and there it was. 2 figures in dark hoodies, walking the fence line with flashlights. One carried a clipboard. The other, something like a measuring wheel. They weren't vandals. They were surveying. I watched them stop, take photos, mark spots with orange spray paint. And then I heard it, one of them saying, "We'll file the easement extension next week." They were planning to redraw my property line. The next morning, I went straight to the county assessor's office. I knew the clerk there, older lady named Patty who'd been through every HOA drama in town. I told her everything. She sighed and said, "You're not the first, Jake. HOAs like this one? They try to reclaim land after legal losses. Technicalities. Easement overlaps. Sometimes even zoning loopholes." Then she leaned closer and whispered, "You didn't hear this from me, but a new HOA map was filed last week. It extends their jurisdiction 50 feet into your south field. 50 feet. Right over where my fence had burned." I clenched my jaw. They were trying to erase the boundary, literally. That night, I went through the old case files again. Court orders, zoning maps, rulings. And there it was, the fine print I'd missed the first time. If a section of land is deemed non-agricultural due to environmental damage, the HOA can reclassify it under shared use zone. The fire. That's why they set the fire. Not revenge. Strategy. Burn the fence, damage the soil, then call it unfit farmland and take it back. I laughed. A bitter, exhausted laugh. Because this wasn't just corruption anymore. This was a chess match. So I started playing my move. I invited a local news reporter to visit my farm. Told her about the case, the fire, the footage, the late-night surveyors. I even showed her the drone photo and that red letter note. She looked horrified. "This is insane," she said. "Do you mind if I record our conversation?" I said, "Record everything." That night, her story went live on the 10 p.m. broadcast. Local HOA accused of retaliation against farmer after court defeat. Within hours, it spread online. Comments poured in. Typical HOA power trip. Burning fences? That's criminal. That guy's a hero for fighting back. The HOA board tried to issue a statement the next morning, something about ongoing zoning discussions and mutual cooperation. But the damage was done. Because the news didn't just air my interview. They also aired my camera footage. The clip showed the two masked men marking the fence at night. The thermal camera footage made them glow like ghosts in the dark. And then, the big reveal. When the sheriff's office enhanced the footage, they confirmed the license plate of the vehicle parked near the road. It belonged to Linda Hayes, the new HOA president. I didn't even have to press charges. By noon, her resignation letter was already on the news. The HOA collapsed faster than it had been built. Meetings canceled. Website shut down. Members disbanded. Within a week, the county announced an audit into every HOA in the district. And me? I rebuilt my fence, again, stronger this time, with steel posts and flameproof coating. I even hung a sign on it that said, "Private property, paid for, fought for, protected." One evening, while fixing the latch on the gate, I noticed a familiar figure walking down the road, the sheriff deputy. He smiled and said, "Guess they picked the wrong farmer to mess with." I laughed. "Guess so." Then he handed me a brown envelope. "What's this?" I asked. "Anonymous drop-off," he said. "Thought you'd want to see it." Inside was a small flash drive. No note this time. When I plugged it into my laptop, it played a short video, grainy security footage, dated from the week before. It showed a group of 4 people in a meeting room, whispering. I recognized 2 of them, Linda and Grant. The third was a man I didn't know. And the fourth was the mayor. They were discussing property redevelopment and zoning acquisitions. It wasn't just my farm. It was the whole area. They'd planned to turn half the countryside into a luxury residential district, and I was in the way. That's when I knew this story wasn't about an HOA anymore. It was about power, money, control. And people like me? We were the last obstacle in their way. But not for long. Because I'd already sent copies of that footage to the same reporter. By the next morning, the headline read, "Mayor tied to HOA land grab scandal, county launches investigation." When the reporter called to thank me for the lead, I told her, "This wasn't about revenge. It's about keeping our land ours." She said, "Well, Jake, you just made sure they'll think twice before messing with another farmer again." That night, I sat on my porch with a cup of coffee, watching the sunset over my field. The air smelled like soil and freedom. No drones. No letters. No SUVs. Just peace. For the first time in months. And as the wind rustled through the corn stalks, I smiled. Because the HOA may rebuild someday. But not here. Not ever again. If your HOA tried to steal your land, and even burned part of it to win, would you expose them publicly or take justice into your own hands? Drop your thoughts in the comments, because Jake's fight isn't over yet. For a while, it felt like peace had finally come back. The news broke big. The mayor resigned. Grant was under probation. Linda disappeared. The county froze all HOA zoning powers until the investigation was done. It should have been over. It should have felt over. But anyone who's dealt with an HOA knows. They don't just vanish. They mutate. 3 quiet months passed. I went back to my normal life, early mornings, feeding livestock, repairing fences, planting winter crops. The farm finally felt like mine again. Then one afternoon, a black sedan pulled up to my gate. The man who stepped out wasn't from around here. Polished shoes, silver tie, government badge clipped to his coat. "Mr. Walker?" he asked. I nodded. He handed me an envelope and said, "New zoning proposal, sir. County redevelopment. You'll want to read this." I tore it open right there, leaning on my gate. It said my property was being considered for community redevelopment under Section 12, Public Green Initiative. In plain English, they were going to seize my land again, just under a new name. Same game. Different mask. That night, I sat on my porch with the papers spread out in front of me. The fire from months ago flickered in my memory, and so did that message. The HOA always rebuilds. I wasn't going to let it happen again. Not quietly. So I made a plan. Over the next week, I met with 3 other landowners who'd gotten the same notice. An older couple named the McKays, and a veteran named Tony who lived by the river. They'd all lost property lines before, small bites the HOA had taken over the years. This time, they were angry. This time, they wanted to fight. We decided to go public, again. But not just with interviews or news clips. We wanted proof. I went through my old files, every HOA notice, every map, every fine, every meeting minute I'd ever recorded. Then Tony, being ex-military, found something huge. A leaked memo from a county insider. It mentioned Project Green Valley. It wasn't about redevelopment. It was about buyouts. Luxury housing. Private investors. And guess who was listed as one of the board consultants? Linda Hayes. She was back. I felt my stomach twist. All this time, she hadn't gone away, she'd gone up. So, I called her. I still had her number. To my surprise, she answered. Her voice was calm. Confident. Well, Jake. I figured you'd call eventually. I said. Why are you doing this again? Haven't you destroyed enough? She chuckled, that same smug little laugh from the HOA meetings. You think this is about you? You think you won? You're a stubborn farmer standing in the way of progress. You'll move. Everyone does eventually. Then she hung up. That was the last straw. The next day, I met the reporter again, Sarah. I gave her the memo, the redevelopment files, and even the phone recording of Linda's call. She looked at me like she already smelled the headline. This isn't just a story anymore, Jake, she said. This is corruption. Political. Financial. And I can prove it. Within a week, her exposé dropped online. Project Green Valley, county officials, HOA ties, and $1 billion land grab. It blew up. Thousands of shares. National coverage. TV interviews. Every homeowner who'd ever suffered under an HOA started sharing it with the same comment. Finally, someone fought back. Then, things moved fast. The county froze all development contracts. Investigations launched. Bank accounts got audited. They found offshore transfers tied to multiple HOA members, including Linda. And this time, there was no hiding. She was arrested. So was the mayor's aide. And 2 board members who had secretly been acting as land brokers. The following month, I got a letter, not from a lawyer, not from an HOA. From the state attorney's office. They thanked me for my cooperation and offered me compensation under the Whistleblower Protection Program. They even offered to buy a small strip of my land, legitimately, to build a public access road. I agreed. Because for once, it was fair. Legal. Respectful. That's all I'd wanted since the beginning. On the day the road project began, Sarah showed up again with her camera crew. She asked me to say something for the closing of her documentary. So I looked right at the camera and said, they called it progress when they tried to steal from people like me. But sometimes, progress means standing your ground. Even when it feels like the whole system's against you. Weeks later, the documentary aired on national TV. And you wouldn't believe it, people from all over started sending letters. Farmers. Retirees. Single moms. All thanking me for giving them courage to fight back against their HOAs. It felt surreal. I wasn't famous. I was just free. That fall, I harvested the best crop I'd had in years. The sky looked clearer. The soil looked richer. And that cursed fence, the one they burned, still stood strong, now covered in sunflowers. Every morning, I'd walk the field with a cup of coffee, the wind rustling through the leaves, and I'd think about how close I came to losing everything. and how close they came to winning. One evening, Tony stopped by, his truck rattling up the dirt road. He grinned and handed me a small wooden sign he'd carved himself. It read, HOA Free Zone, where freedom grows. We planted it right at the gate. And as we stood there laughing, I noticed a car slowing on the road, tourists, probably, or maybe just curious locals. The driver rolled down the window and shouted, "You're that guy from TV, right? The one who beat the HOA?" I laughed. Something like that. He gave me a thumbs up and drove off. Tony turned to me and said, "Guess you're a legend now." I shook my head. Nah. Just a farmer who refused to sell. That night, as the sun dipped behind the horizon, I sat on the porch and watched the lights fade over the fields. For once, the silence didn't feel heavy. It felt earned. Because sometimes, revenge isn't loud. It's not flames, or courtrooms, or viral headlines. Sometimes, revenge is just living free in the land they tried to take from you. And that was enough. If your HOA tried one last trick to steal your land, would you play fair, or would you make sure they never rise again? Tell me below, because every HOA has its day of reckoning.